Hello, this is BN Malwenda. In this video, we are going to cover the part of Application Lifecycle Management Roadmap, the working with releases. By the end of this video, you will be able to identify the relationship between a line of business, create a release tree, recognize the significance, assigning requirements to release and cycles, and to assigning tests to releases and cycles. The testing process begins with defining releases in the management module. You use this module to align business priorities and quality expectations of the business unit with project requirements, tests, and defects. A line of business, or LOB, is an independent business unit within an organization with its own set of rules, standards, resources, objectives, and applications. For example, the figure above illustrates the online banking and credit cards LOBs in a bank. These LOBs, or line of businesses, are concurrently developing software. In ALM, a version of an application is referred to as a release, which represents a group of changes in an application that is available for distribution to customers at the same time. A release is developed within a specified time. For example, Release 10.5 of the online banking application must be developed within 6 months. During these 6 months, the release goes through a series of testing cycles. In ALM, a testing cycle is referred to as a cycle. Each cycle has a specific purpose. For example, Release 10.5 of the online banking application goes through a series of 4 cycles. The first cycle tests the new features included in Release 10.5. After the first cycle is complete, you are certain that new features are included in the release and are working. After the first cycle, the release goes through further testing cycles to test aspects, such as functionality and the performance of the applications. The development team fixes the defects logged by the testing team in a cycle. After fixing the defects, the testing team verifies and closes the defects in the same cycle or in subsequent cycles, depending on the testing process used in an organization. The number of cycles varies from one application to another and depends on the number of changes within a release. After all cycles are complete, you are ready to distribute the release to customers. Understanding cycles and releases. Suppose you are developing a flight reservation application and you plan on releasing version 4.0. Your release might include 4 cycles. The first cycle is for testing new features. The second cycle is for regression testing. The third cycle is for sanity testing. And the fourth cycle verifies the full functionality of the application. A sample release tree. Begin the testing process by defining releases in the management module. The foundation of the management module is the release tree. You use the release tree to model the upcoming releases of an application using a hierarchical structure. The release tree consists of a release folder. The release folder contains different releases of an application. A release consists of cycles, where each cycle has a predefined objective. For example, the figure on the slide shows a release tree for the flight reservation application. The tree shows the flight application folder containing releases 4.0 and its cycles. On the cycle 1, new features tests the new features of the application implemented in the release. After the new features are tested, the development team fixes the defects logged during testing. In cycle 2, integrated system testing, this cycle tests the new features with existing features that might have been impacted by the changes. On cycle 3, performance testing tests the performance of the application for criteria such as number of concurrent users that the application supports and the response time of the application. And then cycle 4, user acceptance testing This cycle ensures that the new features meet the expectations of the business. Tools for creating a release tree. You can create a release tree to define the hierarchical framework of releases. Depending on the testing process followed in an organization, you might create one release folder per application or a single release folder for multiple applications. By default, the left pane of the management module displays the releases folder. Specifying cycle details. After adding a cycle to a release, you specify the details for the cycle using the Details tab. The details include the start date, end date, and a brief description of the cycle. Adding attachments to a cycle. You can add attachments to a cycle. For example, if you use Microsoft Excel to plan the time and resource estimates for a release, you can attach this spreadsheet to a cycle within the release for developers to track time. You use the Attachments tab to add an attachment to a cycle. These are the types of attachments: file, URL, snapshot, system info, clipboard. A file attaches spreadsheets, documents, reports, or other types of files. URL references any valid URL scheme. Snapshot takes a snapshot and save it as a GPG file. System info captures and attaches information about your computer. And lastly, clipboard saves and attaches images from the clipboard. Assigning requirements to releases and cycles. Here are the benefits. It enables you to track requirements coverage, and it provides progress and quality measurements for graphs and reports. After defining requirements in the Requirements submodule, you create cycles in the Management module and assign requirements to a release or to a cycle. Assigning requirements to release and cycles allows you to generate graphs and reports showing the quality and progress of a release and requirements coverage by cycle. Assigning tests to cycles. A test set folder in the Test Lab module contains tests that are covered by your requirements. Before executing tests for testing your requirements, you're assigned test set folders to a cycle for reviewing the progress of tests in the Management module, determining the number of resolved and outstanding defects at a release or a cycle level, and enhancing the reporting granularity for the test set folders. This figure illustrates that when you assign a test set folder to a cycle, all tests within the test set folder are automatically assigned to a cycle. You can assign the test set folder to only one cycle.